So I was thinking we could try that new approach.
Sounds good to me.
We have to clean all this up before anyone sees.
I know, let's hurry.
What do you think about this one here?
That's a good move.
I think I'll play this one.
The night air was heavy when Diep sat across from the officers, her wrists trembling though they bore no chains. The dim light of the interrogation room cast long shadows over her tired face. She spoke with a calmness born not of peace, but of exhaustion. "Since the day they forced me out," she whispered, "I have lived by the roadside. I have not returned, not once." The officer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Your mother-in-law insists it was you who stole the land title. You knew where it was kept." Diep shook her head, a hollow laugh escaping her lips. "I was not even welcome to step over their threshold. How could I steal what I cannot touch?" Her words carried the weight of a woman crushed too many times. The silence that followed was broken only by the scratching of pens against paper. At last, the officer exhaled, frustration etched into his features. "There is no proof. For now, you are free. But 3 days," he warned, his voice sharp. "If we find evidence, prison will swallow you." Diep stood slowly, her legs weak beneath her, and murmured thanks. She did not feel free. She felt like a woman walking with a rope already around her neck. Outside, the world seemed colder, the road less certain. The whispers of prison followed her like ghosts. Meanwhile, in the crumbling house that once had been her home, her former husband Pao sat with his head in his hands. His parents circled like vultures, voices sharp with blame and fear. "Without the land certificate, we lose everything," his mother wailed. "3 generations will be ruined." His father's voice cracked with despair. "How do we find 200 million? How do we keep the roof over our heads?" The scent of unwashed rice bowls filled the room, mixing with tension too thick to breathe. And still, Pao poured himself another glass of rice wine, the liquid burning down his throat as he muttered, "I will find Lin John." She must have answers, but the truth twisted deeper. Lin John, the new bride adored by Pao's mother, had vanished. Days had passed since she cooked or cleaned, her absence glaring like a wound. Pao's father muttered darkly, "We were fools to cast out Diep. She worked, she cared, she did not complain. This one brings nothing but silence and suspicion." Yet Pao, clinging to the illusion of loyalty, defended her fiercely. "She is my wife," he shouted. "Do not accuse her without proof." Still, doubt curled its fingers around the family's heart. Every missing coin, every shadow in the night pointed to betrayal. While the household fractured, a man far removed from their quarrels sat in a high-rise office overlooking the city lights. He was a CEO, young yet hardened by years of ruthless deals. The report on his desk spoke of a woman named Diep, accused, abandoned, forced into the dirt. Something about her story gnawed at him. Perhaps it was her eyes in the grainy photo. eyes that had not yet surrendered, though the world demanded she break. "Find her," he ordered softly, sliding a thick envelope across the table to an informant. "Bring me the truth." The informant was a man who knew every alley, every whisper, every sin buried in the district. His grin was sharp as he pocketed the money. "I know them all," he promised. "The barren wife, the drunk husband, the scheming bride. Give me hours, not days." And so the digging began, shovels cutting into secrets long hidden. By dusk, the CEO held truths darker than he expected. Pao, the husband, had been sterile for years, incapable of fathering a child. Yet it was Diep who had borne the shame, accused of being barren, mocked as useless. The injustice burned like fire in the CEO's chest. Worse still was the woman they called Lin John. Her true name was Tra, a predator cloaked in silk. She had drifted from man to man, leaving ruin in her wake, belly swelling with a child not Pao's, but another's. It was she who had stolen the land certificate, she who had pawned it, and she who had vanished into the night with lies dripping from her lips. Diep had been cast into the gutter, not for her sins, but for Tra's. The CEO clenched his fists, rage simmering. "She is innocent," he whispered, "and yet she bleeds." When he finally found her, the scene was almost unbearable. On the roadside, Diep bent over bundles of firewood, her skin darkened by sun and dust, her hands raw from labor. Passers-by turned away. Few stopped, fewer cared. The CEO approached, his polished shoes crunching against gravel. "How much for the wood?" he asked. She looked up, startled, her eyes hollow yet defiant. 50,000, she said flatly. He handed her more, far more, but she pushed it back, shaking her head. "I take only what I earn." That single sentence pierced him deeper than any lie he had uncovered. He studied her, the woman the world had branded a thief. "You were released?" he asked gently. She nodded once. "No proof," she murmured, "but proof is not freedom. They will drag me back the moment it serves them." Her voice broke just slightly. 3 years. They say 3 years in prison if they cannot find the real thief. Do you believe I stole it too? The question hung between them, fragile as glass. The CEO did not hesitate. "No," he said firmly. "I believe you are innocent, and I will prove it." She laughed bitterly, the sound cracking like dry wood. "Do not waste your pity. I am not worth saving." She turned back to her firewood, her shoulders trembling under the weight of despair. But the CEO's eyes did not waver. He had built empires from nothing, clawed power from men twice his size, and faced wolves in the boardroom without flinching. And now, for this broken woman, he felt a resolve fiercer than any ambition. As he walked away, her voice chased him, soft and hopeless. Perhaps a miracle will come before prison closes its gates. That night, the CEO stood at his window, the city glittering below like 1,000 watching eyes. He thought of Diep's hands, cracked from labor, of her voice trembling yet proud. He thought of the lies that had shackled her, the cruelty that had left her alone. And he made a vow, whispered into the dark, "If the world condemns her, then I will tear the world apart until it listens. I will not let her fall." It was the beginning of a battle not fought in boardrooms, but in shadows, against liars and thieves. And for the first time in years, the CEO felt something more powerful than profit, a hunger for justice. The following days unfolded like a storm, gathering at the edge of the horizon. Diep returned to her fragile routine, selling firewood by the roadside, her shoulders bent under both weight and suspicion. The whispers of her guilt followed her wherever she went. Neighbors turned their backs, children mocked, and even strangers eyed her as if she carried a thief's brand carved into her skin. She tried to ignore them, focusing on the crackle of wood and the rhythm of survival, but inside her chest, fear gnawed endlessly. At night, she dreamt of prison gates, of iron bars clanging shut. Her child clutched her hand in those dreams, but she could not reach him. She always woke with tears on her cheeks. Meanwhile, the CEO set his plan into motion. He summoned the informant again, demanding names, faces, and trails. The man, greasy with confidence, spread papers across the polished desk. "Her name is Tra," he said, tapping a photo of Lynn John in another city, laughing in the arms of a different man. A con artist. She seduced Pao with a belly already carrying another man's child. She pawned the land title for quick cash, then vanished. Her footprints are everywhere if you know where to look. The CEO's jaw tightened. "And Pao?" he asked. The informant smirked. "Pathetic. He still searches for her, bottle in hand, blind to the truth." The CEO's anger grew sharper with every detail. Pao had cast Diep into the gutter, yet worshipped the woman who betrayed him. The injustice was not merely cruel, it was absurd. But anger was not enough. He needed proof, something undeniable. "Follow Tra," he commanded. "Find her, find the deed, and bring me evidence that will silence every whisper against Diep." The informant nodded eagerly, sensing more money in the hunt. The CEO leaned back, staring at the city skyline. For years, his life had been measured in profit margins. Now it was measured in hours stolen from an innocent woman's freedom. At the same time, Pao's household descended into chaos. His mother wailed endlessly, clutching at her chest, lamenting the loss of the land. His father grew silent, his gaze hollow, regret hanging heavy in the air. Neighbors began circling like crows, whispering that the house would soon be gone, that debts would swallow them. Pao stumbled through the streets searching for Lynn John, his clothes stained, his voice hoarse from calling her name. When he found no trace, he turned to strangers, begging for alcohol to numb his shame. In the corners of taverns, people mocked him openly. "A policeman's son fooled by a thief," they laughed. But Pao drank until laughter blurred into silence. For Diep, survival became increasingly perilous. One afternoon, as she balanced bundles of firewood, two creditors cornered her, their voices sharp. "You took the deed," one snarled. "You sold it, now pay." She shook her head desperately, insisting her innocence, but their laughter chilled her. "No one believes you. The law will come, and we will make sure you rot in prison." They shoved her to the dirt, the firewood scattering. She gathered it silently, her hands shaking, her lips pressed tight to keep from crying. Dignity was all she had left, and she clung to it like a dying ember. That evening, the CEO found her again. He watched from the edge of the road as she struggled to collect the last of her wood, her clothes torn, her face streaked with dirt. He stepped forward, offering his hand. She recoiled, her pride refusing pity. "Leave me," she whispered. "The more you help, the worse the whispers become. They will say I found another man, that I beg from strangers." Her eyes glistened with tears she would not shed. The CEO crouched low, his voice steady. "Let them talk. Words cannot change the truth, and I will not leave until the truth is free." She turned away, but her silence was less certain than before. Meanwhile, the informant's hunt bore fruit. He returned one night with documents, receipts from the pawn shop where the land deed had been exchanged. The signature was sloppy, but the photograph captured Tra's face clearly as she signed. "She cannot escape this," the man said with a grin. The CEO studied the evidence, his chest tightening with relief. Proof existed, tangible, undeniable. But proof in paper was fragile. He needed to bring her down publicly before the law. Only then would Diep's name be cleansed. The next morning, he approached the local authorities with caution. He laid the documents on their desk, his voice sharp. "This woman, not Diep, pawned the deed. You know her as Lynn John, but her true name is Tra. She carries lies wherever she goes." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Their notes still listed Diep as the primary suspect, and to change course now meant admitting error. The CEO's gaze hardened. "Will you let an innocent mother hang while the real thief escapes?" His words sliced through their hesitation. At last, they promised to investigate further. It was not victory, but it was movement. Word spread quickly that new evidence had surfaced. Pau's household reeled. His mother's denial cracked, her voice shrill with panic. Not Lin Jan, not my precious daughter-in-law. But his father's silence deepened, shame weighing his shoulders, and Pau, though half drunk, muttered incoherently that his wife could never betray him. Yet doubt poisoned even his heart. He staggered through the night searching for her, his calls growing weaker. In the shadows, neighbors whispered, perhaps the barren wife was not barren at all. Perhaps the wrong woman had suffered. The ground beneath their lies was beginning to crumble. That night, Diep sat in her shelter, her child asleep beside her. She stared at the flickering flame of a small lamp, her thoughts racing. The creditor's threats, the police's warnings, the CEO's promises, they circled in her mind like vultures. She wanted to believe in salvation, but the past had taught her only betrayal. She pressed her palm to her chest, whispering to herself, if truth exists, let it find me before prison does. Her eyes closed, heavy with exhaustion, but in her dreams, she saw chains snapping, light breaking through the bars. Across the city, the CEO stood on his balcony, the night wind tugging at his suit. He thought of her words, her stubborn pride, her trembling strength. He thought of the proof now in his possession, and he whispered into the dark as if swearing an oath, tomorrow I begin the fight. Tomorrow the liar will fall, and she will rise. The city glittered below, indifferent, but he felt the storm inside him grow stronger. It was no longer business, no longer curiosity. It was a war for justice, and he would not retreat. The morning dawned gray, clouds thick with the promise of rain, as though the heavens themselves prepared for judgment. The CEO stood at the edge of the marketplace, his eyes fixed on the woman who had hidden behind so many names. Tra, once Lin Jan, laughed among strangers, her hand resting on her swollen belly, her lies wrapped around her like silk. She did not know that her time had run out. The CEO's jaw tightened. Today the mask would shatter, and truth would walk free. He moved with purpose, the informant at his side, evidence clutched tightly. The local police followed, their expressions taut. They had resisted at first, but the CEO's relentless pressure and undeniable proof had forced them to act. As they approached, Tra's smile faltered. Recognition flickered in her eyes, a spark of fear quickly hidden. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Why are you here?" The CEO's voice cut through the air like steel. "To end your lies." The crowd gathered quickly, curiosity buzzing like hornets. The officer stepped forward, presenting the pawn shop receipts, the photographs, the testimony. Each piece struck like a hammer, each word stripping Tra of her carefully spun illusions. She stammered, denying, then accusing Diep once more, her voice rising in desperation. But the crowd had begun to turn. Whispers spread. So it was her. All along it was her. Eyes narrowed, voices grew hostile. Her web of deceit collapsed under the weight of truth. Pau stumbled forward from the edge of the crowd, his face pale, his body reeking of drink. "Lin Jan!" he cried, his voice cracking. "Tell them it's not true. Tell them you love me." But Tra's eyes turned cold, her words slicing him open. "You were a fool. You gave me a roof and I took it. You gave me your trust and I sold it. That child in my belly, not yours, never yours." The confession spilled like poison, and the crowd gasped. Pau crumpled, the truth crushing what little remained of his pride. In the distance, Diep stood frozen, drawn by the commotion. She'd come to sell her firewood, unaware that fate waited here. When she saw Tra exposed, saw the CEO's steady gaze fixed upon her, she trembled. The words she had begged the world to hear for so long were finally spoken by another. She wanted to weep, to scream, to collapse, but her pride held her still, her hands clenched at her sides, her heart pounding like a drum. "I am free," she thought, though the weight of years still pressed upon her. The officers seized Tra, her protests shrill, her body thrashing. The receipts, the forged signatures, the testimonies, all were enough to bind her in chains. "You will answer before the law," one officer declared. The crowd roared approval, their anger now aimed squarely at the thief who had mocked them all. For the first time in years, Diep felt the tide shift. She was no longer the accused, no longer the scapegoat. The chains that had haunted her dreams shattered in the daylight. The CEO turned to her then, his voice low but fierce. "It is finished. You are innocent. The world will know." But Diep shook her head, tears streaming. "Nothing erases 3 years of shame. Nothing gives me back what I lost." Her voice cracked, raw with grief. The CEO stepped closer, his eyes unwavering. "No, but truth can give you tomorrow, and tomorrow is where your strength will live." She met his gaze, and for the first time, hope flickered, a fragile flame refusing to die. Back at Pau's home, chaos reigned. His mother wailed, tearing at her hair, mourning not the crime, but the fall of her illusions. His father sat in silence, regret carving deep lines into his face. Neighbors spat curses at the house, mocking the family that had cast out the faithful for the deceitful. Pau himself sat slumped in the corner, broken beyond words, his eyes empty. They had chosen their path, and it led only to ruin. Justice had not spared them, it had revealed them. For Diep, however, a new path opened. The CEO accompanied her back to the roadside, where her bundles of wood still lay waiting. He watched as she lifted one, her movements weary but steady. "Let me help," he offered. She shook her head, a faint smile touching her lips. "I will carry my own burdens, but thank you for lifting the one I could not." Her voice was soft yet strong. The CEO bowed his head, honoring her resolve. He had not saved her. He had only uncovered what she had always known, her innocence. That night, under a sky streaked with stars, Diep sat with her child beside the flickering flame of her small lamp. She told him a story of a bird trapped in a cage, accused of stealing what it never touched. For 3 long years, the bird sang in darkness. But one day, the cage opened and the bird flew free. Her son listened with wide eyes, then whispered, "So the bird was you, me." She smiled through tears, pulling him close. "Yes, my son, and now we fly." Across the city, the CEO stood once more at his window, the lights below shimmering like embers. He thought of Diep's smile, fragile yet unbroken, and felt a strange warmth stir in his chest. He had fought many battles, but none had mattered more. For once, profit and power seemed hollow beside the quiet victory of a woman's freedom. He whispered into the night, "Justice lives, even in the shadows." The wind carried his words away, but in his heart, they burned eternal. And so the story closed, not with triumphal cheers, but with something deeper. A woman once condemned stood free, her dignity restored. A liar was unmasked, a family undone by their own cruelty, and a man of power found a new kind of strength, not in wealth, but in compassion. For Diep, the road ahead was still hard, but it was hers to walk, unchained, unbroken. The echoes of injustice would follow her, but so would the truth, and truth, once freed, cannot be silenced.